Aloha, my name is Kevin Kimball. I'm an associate professor at BYU Hawaii. The purpose of this video is to help you learn how to create a direct labor variance analysis report, and more importantly, to create a variance analysis report. This could be on direct labor, it could be on materials, raw materials variances. The big idea is that whenever you make a plan or a budget for the future as to production or certain inputs that you're going to need to create a finished product, you tend to make a budget. And as you can see here, I've got some budgeted figures. And in this case, we're going to be evaluating the cleaning of a good-sized hotel, a 100-room hotel. And let's assume that the standard rate per hour of the people that we plan on hiring to clean the rooms over the next year is $8.50 per hour. Let's change that to a currency. So let's assume we plan on paying $8.50 an hour, and let's assume that we believe, or we're budgeting, 0.95 hours per room. So that's a little bit less than an hour. So 95% of an hour. You could compute the minutes. If we took this and multiplied by 60, that's effectively 57 minutes. So we're thinking it takes 57 minutes per room to clean a room. It could be less than that, it could be greater than that, but that's what you believe it will take. That's your budget. So what we're saying is if we were to take that $8.50 per hour of work, multiplied by the number of hours it takes, in this case 57 minutes or 95% of an hour, and I'll change this to be currency, it's going to cost about $8.08 per room to have it cleaned. In this case, if we have 100 rooms, we're budgeting that 100 rooms times $8, and let's do that again, times $8.08. So we're thinking each time we have to clean all 100 rooms, it would cost us $807.50 of basic direct labor hour cost. You'll see this is a little bit overly simplified, but I hope you see the idea that we're budgeting that we're going to pay our workers $8.50 an hour, and we're budgeting that it'll take them about 57 minutes or 95% of an hour to clean a room. And so per room we're budgeting $8.08 to clean a given room, and we have 100 rooms, and we could do the math to determine the total cost. Now when you get into the next year, so let's assume this plan was made back in December for the following year, and when you get in the next room you would put in your actuals. So maybe in January, although you thought you'd be paying people $8.50 an hour, you're actually able to pay only $8.20. Maybe there's a recession, maybe you're hiring less qualified workers, whatever it is, but you're only paying $8.20 an hour. But those workers, when they worked, it actually took them a little more than an hour, so 105% of an hour. So if we wanted to check that math, take that times 60 minutes, so it's taking about 62.7 minutes per room. So although you're paying them less, it is taking longer. Now if you compare that to what you budgeted, on the fee side, on the direct labor cost side for the per hour rate, you actually are able to pay less than you expect. That's kind of a favorable thing if you're just looking at it from the cost. But when it comes down to the hours you're using, you thought you'd use only 0.95 of an hour, but you're using 1.045 an hour. That's unfavorable. So we're going to talk about favorable and unfavorable variances, but the bottom line is you thought it would only cost you in total $8.08 per room, but it's costing you $8.57. Well, what caused it? What caused it is you're using too many hours, but that use of too many hours actually was offset a little bit by the fact that you could pay a little bit less. So the net impact of these two variances, the favorable variance on the rate and the unfavorable variance on the time, actually wound up being $8.57. So now that we have 100 rooms, let's assume we have a certain occupancy. Let's say we're not going to clean all 100 rooms, maybe only cleaning 90% of the rooms because it's not fully occupied. And we put in the number of days. So this is the actual occupancy, this is the actual number of days, and this is the total number of rooms cleaned. So you can see there's some variances in the cost per room, and then we'll also look at how many rooms are cleaned, and then we get down and we look at the totals. So down below here, the actual total labor cost is our total labor cost times the number of rooms cleaned. And that's our actual total labor cost. Now what you thought you would pay would be the number of rooms cleaned times this standard labor cost. And we could actually name this standard labor cost per room. Okay, and then I'm going to go back down here and I'm going to apply this apply names, standard labor cost per room. And so now in my formula here, you can see I have standard labor cost per room. I just think that's a little easier for people to read. Okay, so in other words, we've got a variance. Our actual total cost is $23,000, but we budgeted that we should have only paid $22,000. So we have an unfavorable variance as to our labor costs of $1,300. Well, now you want to break this out and say, well, what caused that unfavorable variance? Was it the labor cost for the hourly rate too high? Was it too low? Did they take too long? Did they take too little? How did those two mix and offset each other? That's what we do down below. The direct labor rate variance, in other words, the reason we had this variance in relation to the rate we paid, we actually saved $874. So it's a favorable variance, and that's this formula here, and we'll get to that in the actual video. And that was offset, though, by the very negative movement in the time it took to clean the rooms, and this will also, once again, get into the formulas there and prove that out. But when you take these two variances, the favorable variance on the rate, because we didn't pay as much per hour, offset by the unfavorable variance on the time it took, because we took longer than we thought we would, the total direct labor variance is 1,378, as you can see, and it's unfavorable. So I'm just proving out that number. So we took this variance and we broke it out into two root causes. And then down below, I'm going to shrink this a little bit so you can see it. See the graph. Bring this down. So as you can see here, I went and graphed it. This is the total variance, and that was 1,378, as you can see here, right about that number. And the unfavorable variance, which is below it, is caused by the direct labor efficiency variance. That means how much time they took, offset by the direct labor rate variance. So if you take these two and offset them, you come to this in between, which is the total variance. So that's the purpose of this video, is to help you understand the idea of variances and help you create a schedule that can compute the variances of a variety of different things. You can have variances on your direct labor, you can have variances on your direct materials, you can have variances on your overhead, and some of those concepts you may not have heard yet if you haven't taken managerial accounting. But these are useful concepts, and we will get in and show you how to create the schedule. So first of all, I'm going to move this schedule out of the way and just move it off the screen, and we'll bring on a new blank Microsoft Excel 2007 and just hit Control N to bring on a new workbook, and we'll get going here. We're going to name this. You can go up here, File, hit the Office button and Save As, or as you know before, Alt FA, and we will save it. And we want to save this as Direct Labor Variance Analysis, and I'll call this the post video because it'll be after I've created the video. And I'll put it in my folder, Direct Labor Variance Analysis, save it here as an Excel workbook by choosing the drop down. This is my original, which you already saw in my introductory, And so we've got this saved. And every once in a while you might want to hit the Control S button, which is an automatic save of what you've done, just in case the computer crashes or something, so you can save your work as you go along. Let's begin by titling this up at the top, Direct Labor-Variance Analysis Report. This is for the year ended, and let's assume this is for the year ended 12/31/XO. I'll change the width of these columns later to allow you to see all that at the same time. Prepared by Kevin Kimball, prepared on, and we're going to prepare it. Obviously these dates might seem a little funny if I just do today, but I'm going to do it anyway. And the purpose. The purpose of this worksheet is to compute the monthly direct labor variances, rate and efficiency for the past year in relation to the wages paid and the hours incurred by the housekeeping staff at a hotel. Here on row 8 we'll put in our budget. These are standards. We often in managerial accounting call these standards. So we have, I'll indent this a little bit, standard rate, and that's a per hour basis, and put an X, meaning multiply by, standard hours, and that's per room, which would give us, and whenever you put an equals, it thinks that you're putting in a formula, and so if I start typing something, standard something, it's going to think this is a formula. It's going to give me an error message. So what I do is I put in a single apostrophe to say, hey, this is going to be a text. It's not a formula. It's not an active formula that Excel should compute anything on. Standard labor cost, and that will be per room. And we'll have our total rooms up here in the top. Why don't I bring these over right now? I'm just dragging and dropping the column width. Let's say our standard rate's $8.50. Standard hours, let's say we have 0.95. And the standard cost per room, we'll compute that in a second. I'll put in the number of rooms here. Let's name these cells. So in the first cell, now as you may already know, you could just go up here and choose define name, and it will bring up what it thinks you want to name it, but I don't want it to be that long, so I think I'll just call it standard rate. So I can just edit that. Here I'm going to define name, and I'm just going to do standard hours. This next one I will make a little bit longer. Why don't I do STD, standing for standard labor cost per room. It looks like I actually typed right over that. That was an accident. I'm going to delete that, so I got to go up to my define names again, and I'll type it in here. STD labor cost per room. And we'll have down below total rooms. In fact, this one I could probably just choose define names, and that'll come out fine, total rooms. So I've got all these names. So my standard labor cost per room would be equal to the standard rate times the standard hours. And hopefully that math makes sense. We'll highlight standard rate, and we'll highlight standard cost, and we'll change this to be, maybe let's change to currency. And we might even do it a little bit wider. Let's just so you can see the decimals there. I'll shrink it on the standard rate though, because we wouldn't pay pennies. But standard labor cost per room, since we have a certain percentage there, it might show that third digit. That may be a personal preference, but let's highlight these as the input cells. I use the control button, drag and drop, and then control click as well. And I'll keep up with my standard color formatting here. I usually do this green, and I'll do a dark bold around. I could have waited to the end to do that, but I thought I'd go ahead and do that now. Let's get into the actual area. These are the actuals. So one thing you can notice, start typing January, February. So I've started to create a sequence, and once it has a sequence that it can recognize, like months, days of the week, it can recognize that, and I'll drag this out to December. So you don't have to type all those. That saves you some time. Here I'll indent a little bit, and I'll type actual rate, that's per hour, multiplied by actual hours per room. And maybe I want to bring that in just a little bit further to be consistent. I have to put an apostrophe because I'm putting in the equal sign. If I don't do that, it starts thinking I'm putting in a formula that Excel should start computing on. Actual labor cost, that's per room. I bring this over a little bit further, give me a little more room. Down below, I want to indicate the totals, so I'm going to put in the total rooms, and I need to multiply by the occupancy percentage, which we'd have to input, and multiply by the number of days in that month, which is pretty standard except for February, as you know, and total rooms cleaned. So that's kind of how we're setting this up. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put in actuals. This whole section here, actual rate and actual hours, these will need to be input by the user as well. So I'll change the color there and put a bold around it. These will have to be input. So these green will have to be input, and these actuals down here will have to be input. And the reality here in these actuals, you can come up with any numbers you like. I do have some numbers in already, so I have 8.2 and 8.10, and I could put in all those exactly as in my original example. Or if you just, for purposes of this spreadsheet, you just want to make up some numbers. Naturally in the real business you'd use actuals, but you could do this. You could do random, and you could have, actually I think it's called rand between, and you can have it just make up some numbers for you. And let's say we want to have the numbers random between $8.7 per hour and maybe, let's do a little bit lower, $8.2 per hour up to $9.1 per hour. And I'll bump that up with currency to show the 2 decimal, and we'll drag this over that formula. That's not exactly what I wanted to have happen. Let's try that one more time. I'm going to undo that. Just hit a Control Z to undo that. And I want rand between these two. That's okay. If I were to copy that, you know, I might actually hold off on that. That's not really going how I wanted it to go. I'll just show you what I was going to do here in a second. I'll just go like this. Rand. If you do rand, that's going to give you a random number between 0 and 1. So you could take that and you could multiply it by maybe 8.5. Multiply it by 8.5. And what that does, it gives you a random number. And I could drag that over. That would just be a quick way to come up with just some practice numbers. You got to watch out once you do that, though. Every time, let's say I do a calculation down below, you'll watch as I hit enter, all these random numbers will change, because every time the a computation is done on Excel, the random numbers recompute. So you see that all the numbers changed. So what I'm going to do is you can go ahead and do these, but I'm just going to save myself some time at least. I'm going to copy from the solution these numbers that I made up, and I'm just going to paste them in. So you can type those in manually if you want, but all these should be actual data numbers that occurred in the month of January as the cleaning of the hotel rooms occurred. I was just going to show you a quick way to come up with some fake numbers, but anyway, I'm not going to do that. It wasn't working exactly how I wanted, and it's not really a focus of this particular tutorial. So let's go on down. Therefore, these actual, if you take this actual rate times the actual number of hours, you multiply those two together, that would give you the actual labor cost per room to have cleaned the rooms in the month of January. So let's do that math. Let's take this and actual rate times the actual hours, and then we can grab this fill handle and drag it across, and you see that all those computations are done for you. Next, you can click on to total rooms, and total rooms would be this 100, and that I guess for this whole year it doesn't change. You know, I guess you don't lose too many rooms in a hotel very often. What you do lose is occupancy, and that will change on a monthly basis. So that once again will be a variable. You know, if I'm going to highlight this and make it blue. These are actual variables that the company would have to input based on the actual occupancy of that month. So if you want to match my numbers, you will have to just put these in manually. I'm going to copy and paste these actuals from my solution. These are numbers that are just made up. In a real business, you would actually put in the actual for the month, but all I did is I just copied these in. And you can type these in if you want to kind of match my solution here. So the total rooms cleaned would be equal to the total rooms times the occupancy rate times the number of days in that particular month. So in the month of January they cleaned 2,790 rooms, but February obviously will be less because there were only 28 days regardless of what the occupancy was. Occupancy was a little bit less, so already that's going to make the number of rooms cleaned lower, but there are also only 28 days in the month of February. So these were actuals. These are actual rooms cleaned, and that's going to be used in our calculations to compute our variances. So on row 27 here, I'm going to type in our variance summary report. Favorable will be positive numbers. And if they're unfavorable, we'll have it show up with a parentheses around it, meaning it's a negative number. And we have the same month, so since I already have these months up here, I could highlight those, copy, Control-C, and then row 29, just Control-V and paste it. On the left-hand side, we need to title these up. We have our actual total labor cost. We're going to have our budgeted total labor cost, our total direct labor variance, which is simply the difference between what we thought we would incur versus what we actually did incur. And now we'll compute those variances. So if you ask yourself, well, what was the actual total labor cost in the month of January? What you could do is you could say, well, how many rooms did we clean? Well, we cleaned 2,790 here in cell B24. And what price did we pay per room, which was the actual rate times the actual hours? We paid $8.57 per room. So that's our actual labor cost to clean a given room. Now the question is, what did we think we would pay based on our budgeted rates and hours, based on this budgeted labor cost per room? And the difference between those two would then be our variance. So let's go down and compute that. So we thought we would pay $8.75 per room. How many rooms did we actually clean? We do have to use the actual rooms cleaned here in this math, and that gives us 22,529. I can change that so we can see the format is the same. And therefore, if we spent more actually than we thought we would spend, that is unfavorable. So we're going to set up this math so it does come up as a negative. We'll take our budget, what we thought we'd pay, minus the actual, and that'll turn up as a negative. This is an unfavorable variance. We definitely paid more than what we had hoped we would pay. I believe we've set up our formulas correctly so that if we copy these across, this relative referencing will copy across and go to column C, D, E for the different months, so that's fine on the actual. The budgeted total labor cost, we will always have to refer to the standard up above, and we'll multiply it by the number of rooms cleaned, B24. That'll be variable, and that'll be a relative reference as it copies across, and therefore taking the difference between these two, I think we have our formula right. So if we take that and just drag it across, we have all the variances. Now we'll have to, maybe on all these columns, I'm gonna go up here and click and drag across with my left mouse, and then right click and change the column width to maybe let's say 15. Looks a bit wide. Why don't I change it to 12? I like to get these on the screen. It might even have to be a little bit less wide, maybe only 10. Anyway, you can play with that a little bit, but I did need to make sure that these were wide enough to handle the numbers. The other option would have been to highlight this and then double click, and it auto fits for what's in those various columns. Anyway, so that is our total direct labor variance. Now the question is, how much of this total direct labor variance was caused due to the fact that we underpaid standard versus actual on a per hour basis, and how much of it was caused because we took too long actual versus planned, so actual versus standard. So we have a difference in the standard versus actual on the rate, and we underpaid, and we have a difference between the actual and the standard time where we overused time. So we'll now break those out into the two component pieces. We have the direct labor rate variance, and this will explain the the amount caused by the rate difference, and the direct labor efficiency. Efficiency means how much time do they take. Efficiency variance. And in total, we'll have our check figure, which would be the sum of those two, total direct labor variance. And we'll have a check figure to make sure that the total direct labor variance up here matches the total direct labor variance down here, which will have been computed slightly differently. This is where having named the cells will have come in handy. I'm going to do something a little different here to ensure that that you can see the names in the variables of the formula. So the way I'm going to set this up is I'm going to name this cell total rooms cleaned, but you'll notice that I don't name it as an absolute reference. This will be new. I'm going to define the name, but you see here this is an absolute reference to column B, column 24. Well, when I refer to total rooms for January, I want it to refer to column B24, that's correct, but when it goes over here I want it to refer to column C24. So what I can do is I can remove that $sign in front of B, and that makes the column reference relative. So when I refer to total rooms cleaned here, it's going to refer to column C. Here it's going to refer to column D. So this is called a mixed reference. It has partial, the column is relative, but the row is absolute. So now I've got total rooms cleaned named. I'm going to do the same thing for the actual hours per room. So up here I'm going to click on actual hours per room, go to define name. It wants to make this a purely absolute reference to cell B17, but I really want the column to be able to move as I refer to it. So I'm going to call this B17, $17. So it'll always refer to row 17, but I want it to change the column as it gets copied over, as a reference to it gets copied over. We're going to do the same thing for the actual hours. Define the name, and I'm going to make the column relative but leave the row absolute. Now we have all the pieces that would allow us to do the formula to compute the direct labor rate variance. In other words, the variance caused by this change in rate. So if you look at it logically, you see, hey, we're 30 cents different. Well, take that 30 cent different and multiply it by the actual hours per room. Okay, so take this difference per hour and multiply by the actual hours per room, and then multiply by the number of rooms. So we're going to do that. We'll take our total rooms cleaned, and I do need to start typing in total rooms cleaned, and I want to multiply that total rooms cleaned by the actual hours, let's see if I can, I'll go up to my name manager here. Let's see, actual hours per room. There it is, actual hours per room. It's kind of a weird name. Fact, why don't I really don't like that name. I'm going to go back to actual hours per room because I went and asked it to give me a suggestion. I'm going to go back to define name, actually to my name manager. I'm going to remove that actual hours per room, click on it, choose delete, and now I'm going to do new, and I want this to just be actual hours per room. And once again, I need to make sure that this column B is not fixed. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful. So you see how you can use the name manager to go and change things. I really didn't like that name. It seemed hard to find as I type in my formula. So equals total rooms cleaned, I click on it, times the actual hours per room, and then I multiply that by the standard rate, what I thought I would pay, minus the actual rate per hour. And so what you see here, this difference here is the variance in the rate per hour. Then I have to multiply by the actual hours, and then multiply that by the total rooms cleaned, and that gives you your 874.67 is your direct labor rate variance. Now let's go to our direct labor efficiency variance. Now if you think about this, what would cause an efficiency variance? Well, an efficiency variance would be caused by taking more or less time actually, as noted here, versus what you planned. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. And we'll get up here, and when you take Accounting 203 or a managerial accounting class, you should see, you'll get into these variances a little bit more, but we did want to teach you this. So we take the total rooms cleaned, and we're going to multiply that by the, and I'm going to do a couple parentheses here, take the standard hours minus the actual hours per room. So this will give us a variance in the time per room, and we have to multiply that by the standard rate per room, which is fixed up there, that's budget, and that would be our variance for the direct labor efficiency. So now, if I take the difference between those two, I would get my total direct labor variance. The way I'll do that, I'll just type Alt equals, that's a hotkey for doing a sum of contiguous cells with values in them, and I get a direct labor variance of exactly the same as what we saw in total, so we reconciled, and I'm just going to prove that out by taking this take the total minus my reconciliation below, and I've got my check figures, so if I highlight that whole thing and drag and drop, I've got all my variances for the whole time. So although this looked complicated at the very beginning, I hope you're seeing the logic behind these variances. I'm going to highlight this whole range, and I want to set the formatting the same, maybe just a comma with a couple decimal places. Sometimes people will actually put maybe accounting at the very top, and we'd have to highlight these to make them a little bit wider. So you see that it puts $1 at the very top, and we often will do the bottom. Let's put all these in dollars. So I'm holding the control and dragging and dropping. Control key is still held down. Control key is still held down, and I will format those with accounting. And we tend to, in accounting, like to, I'm going to control and hold this down again, and control and drag across again. We like to use this format here, which is one single line above and a double line below, and it shows that you're adding up some numbers. I'll do the same up here as well, and down here below that double line. So I think this is looking pretty good. Maybe I will bold the month names, bold them and center them. So that's looking pretty good. Why don't I put in a little break in between these here, so a color break, so you can see that that is something new. Maybe orange, and we'll put a thick border around it, and we'll bold the words. Our actual, maybe we'll make those blue. And why don't I even insert a row here? I'm going to Alt-IR. If I go to cell A16, just go Alt-IR, that's insert row. And all the referencing didn't get messed up by doing that. When you use the insert function, it'll keep all the referencing to the different cells that you had before. So I can put a bold around it, make it blue, and bold it. Up in the budget, we'll make it the same color as that green as we saw above. Let's see here. I think that's the green. Control B and then bold it around. If we wanted to, we could center these. Once again, these are all personal preference. I'll bold the purpose. I tend to always do that. I'm not sure why, but I do that. So it looks like it's pretty good. I think this is reconciling well. You can see that there's variances. Maybe these total rooms cleaned. It's helpful to put the comma format, but you don't really want decimals because these are rooms and you don't have like a 0.3 room, so you can reduce the decimal to make that look a little bit nicer. Okay. Now one final thing, as you've probably heard, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and a picture is also worth 1,000 numbers. So what we've got here is we've got these values, and we want to graph them. Okay, so let's assume that we want to graph them. We can highlight these here and insert a line chart. And what it did is it created this graph. We'll just work on it here on top of the numbers, and we'll drag it down below when we feel good about it. So as you can tell, by picking up the titles on the left-hand side and all the numbers, it automatically labeled these different lines. So this is the direct labor rate variance. Here's 0. This is the total variance, and this is the direct labor efficiency variance. These below 0 are unfavorable, and these above are favorable. One thing you can do now is you can maybe change these. Instead of being 1, 2, 3, 4, you can just click that. See if I can get the clicker going here. Okay, so I right-click that and select data. So what I did is I right-clicked, and these numbers were selected, and I can edit the horizontal axis label. And my horizontal axis label is going to be these months, and I know that underneath here are my months, and hopefully that works for you, that you recognize that. And so that's looking a little bit better, so we know what months these are. And then one last thing, what you can do is you can go up here, you can choose one of these chart layouts, and maybe you want this top left one. And what it did here is it brought in axis titles. So this chart title, I can just click it, just click in the letters and type in a title. I call it Direct Labor-Variance Analysis. for the year ended 12/31/XO. And on the axis title over here on this left hand side, you might want to let people know what these represent. And so you just click in there and you can just start typing. I'm going to delete what's in there. Over slash, and then I put parentheses under parentheses variances, and this is in dollars. Okay, so sometimes you might say that these are in thousands of dollars or something like that, but I think that's the end of my graph. I'm going to drag that down here below so you can see that I have my data up above. I'll drag this down and you can see this is the graph down below, and I think that's about what we want to accomplish with this particular worksheet. Hopefully you understand the idea of variances. As you take later classes, you will learn this idea of creating those variance analyses and understanding the over and under and why the math is the way it is. I think hopefully you can just see the basic logic, but you will get into that more later on. So good luck with this, and aloha. One thing I didn't catch, I didn't run my spell check. I will do that. Right when I said aloha, I noticed that I misspelled incorrect, so I better run my spell check here. I should do that every time. Sometimes I get in a rush, as most people do, but I need to not forget that. Incorrect, as you can tell here, I misspelled, and so I need to change that to be incorrect, and I can ignore that. And I've just completed that spell check. So I was able to catch that error. Sometimes you need to walk away from the desk for a few minutes and then come back and you'll catch errors that you wouldn't notice otherwise. So now this is the official aloha.